My name is Steve Pearce. My father served at Maralinga in the 60s during the nuclear tests. He was there at the minor trials, which are possibly some of the most polluting tests that were done by the British government.
What was his job?
He was an air movements officer. He was in charge of the airfield at Maralinga.
And when we talked, and this is really important, your father essentially never ever talked about his service at Maralinga, right?
Not in the early days, no. Only when I was older. We used to go away when I had time off work, just the two of us. We would do our what we call boys' weekends, and we would just pick somewhere in the UK and go travelling. We spent a lot of time in the car and obviously in the restaurant and the bar. And he started to open up and talk about his time at Maralinga.
Great, we'll get to that. So what I want to talk about is, because you said some pretty important things when we talked on the phone. Obviously, when you were born, there were problems up front.
Yes.
And speak about those, because what I really want you also to segue into was your mother refused to send you to one of the schools or whatever it was. Wasn't that it?
Pretty much, yes.
All right, go ahead.
When I was born, I was obviously born with disabilities. The main obvious one is short stature, which is still undiagnosed to this day. There were several other issues, but it has affected me a lot. And even though the educational services were aware of my needs, and possibly that my disabilities were physical only, they still wanted to send me to special schools, which catered for all sorts of learning difficulties and physical difficulties. My mum and dad fought really hard for me to actually go to mainstream school on the grounds that there was nothing wrong with my brain, so let's get him into mainstream school. All that was different about me was my physicality. It was obvious there was a difference with me, and I felt different to every other child at school. And yeah, I was bullied. More so in my secondary school, there was quite a few bullies that, you know, I still remember to this day. It was difficult, but at the time I just thought it's one of those things and I have to get used to it. It's part of my life.
So since your father never spoke about you knew that he was in the military.
Yes.
When did you suspect or have any idea that possibly it was service related to your father being exposed to ionizing radiation?
I think I'd always had, when I knew he'd been involved in the nuclear military side of things, I always figured perhaps there's a link, perhaps there is, but I was almost kind of, well, probably not, because I would have known about it. But it was only when I was going through Facebook and I sort of stumbled across information myself and groups myself, which basically told me that I could be one of the descendants that were affected. The more I looked, the more I thought, everything's lining up, this all fits, it's got to be, it has to be.
Describe what your father did in terms of, it was some of the dirtiest work that was done in Maralinga, correct?
Yeah.
That you know of?
Yes, the minor trials that Dad was involved in were when the government were testing smaller amounts of explosives, but what they were actually testing for was what would happen in the event of an accident. Say, for example, an aircraft carrying a nuclear weapon was to crash. What would it take to detonate that warhead? So they were doing stuff like strapping conventional explosives to warheads to literally try and blow them up, try and spark that nuclear detonation. And there was talk of, when these sort of tests are happening, there was molten plutonium spraying 200 foot in the air, and this was coming down in the sand all around them, all around the test area. And it just sounded uncontrolled. They were literally just doing anything to try and detonate these warheads, and it was, I guess you might say, reckless.
And so when you did ask your father about it, correct?
Yes.
And what was his reaction?
He talked about some of the safety that was involved, or the lack of safety, he was kind of saying that there was no safety. They were talked about. It was almost lip service to safety. There would be a single wire fence separating the test area from the rest of the surroundings, and of course he would say, well, the sand is radioactive. The sand does not obey a wire fence, so it's ridiculous. The sand would blow onto your clothes, be in your vehicle, it would be in your face, be in your food. It was everywhere. You ingested it, you inhaled it. A fence was not going to keep radioactive sand out. It was just lip service to safety.
And you also said when we were talking, there was something about some documents that disappeared that you'd collected newspapers, or your mother had collected news.
It was, I think when I was quite young, one of Dad's colleagues in the RAF had collated some information that basically I wasn't the only affected child, that there were problems with people that had served at the nuclear tests, and he sent them all to Dad. And Dad kind of, I think, looked at it and then squirreled it away and didn't really want to discuss it. And I think he put it in a drawer, and then later when Mum went to try and find these documents, they'd gone. So they've never been seen since, so we assume he must have binned them, and kind of, he didn't really want to look into it much.
And then you guys went through this incredible evolution in your relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
Well, I guess as he got older, he just kind of thought, somebody needs to... I guess he told me a lot of stuff, maybe knowing that someday the truth would come out, and that I, maybe after he had gone, should be one of the ones who helped carry this forward.
And what did you guys do? You went on road trips, right?
Yeah, we went on the road trips. We had our boys' weekends away. We'd go travelling. We'd literally pick the map of the UK and say, we've never been there, let's go. Let's spend the weekend there. Let's see what there is. So we went from, we even did a thing called the Compass Challenge, where we tried to go to the most northerly, easterly, westerly and southerly part of the United Kingdom and just say, we're here. So we'd pick a hotel, we'd stay for the weekend, and you know, there were really good times, and we talked a lot. There were times that I really, really cherish, and we just talked about his service, we talked about everything, and yeah, we discussed Maralinga quite a lot.
Did you go to John O'Groats?
We did.
That's a miserable place.
But it's not the most northerly place.
What is the most northerly?
A place called Dunnet Head. We did John O'Groats and then we went up to Dunnet Head.
How much further up is that?
It's not that far, but it was a bit disappointing because the mist was down, so we couldn't see anything.
Did your father have any kind of medical problems that you know of that could be related to the test?
He enjoyed really good health. The only thing that probably would have been considered to do with this is he had a skin condition that appeared on his legs, and when he went to see the dermatologist asked him whether he'd spent most of his life in the tropics, and he's like, no. He said, I spent a year in Australia, and he said, well, this kind of skin damage is only seen in people that have lived for many, many years in very hot climates, and it's kind of noticeable that the damage, or the skin condition, stopped at where your short line was and your arm sleeve, short sleeve would be. So it's a good sign that Australia had something to do with it, because he was wearing short sleeves and shorts all the time. And
you now have a son.
Yes.
Oh, you have a sister too, right?
I do, yes.
And how is she?
She's fine. She has 2 fantastic children, 2 little boys.
No problems whatsoever right now?
No.
Okay, so tell us how you met your wife and how you decided to have a child. Because you, one time, I think, said that you had pretty much given up the idea of it.
Yeah, I'd always thought whatever was the damage in my DNA, I did not want to pass on to another child, but that was me speaking as a single man. And then I started doing an Open University course, studying a degree, and I met in basically an online forum this wonderful lady who we just clicked, and we just got talking and messaging offline, and we ended up getting married. And Of course, then there's more than just my thoughts, my opinions to take into consideration. I knew she wanted a child, and deep down I've always wanted a child. And that was a tough decision to make, never to have one. But life changes, people change. And so, yeah, we decided to have a child. And I kind of thought, well, I knew it was a risk. I really knew it was a risk that I was taking. But I thought, if my child is born with a disability, who better to raise them than I know what it's like to live with disability. So perhaps that would make me a good father to a disabled child. So I thought, it's kind of worth the risk.
And how is it now?
He's 9.5 months old, and he's perfect. He's absolutely wonderful.
And what is his name?
Sasha.
And your wife's name?
Gina.
So you're now with LABRATS, and you're become a very figurable spokesperson for LABRATS.
Yes.
So how did you get involved with that?
Again, through online activity. I found LABRATS and found that the way that they were going about campaigning was fantastic. It was different. It was more about action and getting the message out there and spreading the word and raising awareness. And I just thought, this is something I can help with, something I wanted to be a part of, because the veterans deserve recognition, and so do the descendants. It needs to happen. So I thought, yeah, let's throw myself into this.
And what do you think?
I think we'll get there. I really do. It may take a few years, but it's got to be done. I mean, for the sake of people like my son, it's too late for people like me and a lot of the veterans, but the one worry I have is that, yes, my son is fine right now, but what about when he's 5? What about when he's 15? What about when he's 20? Is he going to have some sort of illness, some sort of cancer, tumour? Anything could develop, because a lot of these conditions do develop in adolescence. And if he went to the doctor tomorrow, or when he's 5 or when he's 15, the doctors might know nothing about the atomic veterans. They'll know nothing about radiation. There's no awareness, there's no research, there's no education in the medical profession about these conditions that are happening. And this is what we need to campaign for, to get the recognition out there, to raise awareness, to get the research done, and to get the medical professions educated. So when people do go to the doctor, they can say, this could be because of your family history with the nuclear veterans, and to get funds available to help them. Because at the moment, there's nothing. I mean, they've done nothing for me. They don't even know what's wrong with me. And that, I think, is, considering we're supposed to have the best health service in the world, it's not right.
And when you talk to doctors, what do they say?
I don't really talk to them about it anymore, because it's pointless.
Because I think, oh, that's right, because when we talked, there was a doctor in Germany.
Many years ago, yeah.
Okay, and would you kind of just briefly go over that, because you said you were a really rare person on the spectrum.
Yeah, apparently there's 200 forms of short stature. I fit none of them. They've tried and tried and tried to diagnose me and pinpoint my exact condition. And this even went to a professor in Germany. And the best they can get down to is this one type. But they say, you're very close to that, you're something like it, but you're not it. But then they can't tell me what it is. So I'm unique, I guess.
And your father went through a unique experience, just like a lot of these other people. So yes. You now have a forum. Hopefully this video will be shown, put together for Alan LABRATS under his direction, will be shown in Vienna at a UN conference. What do you want to say to the world?
I want to say to the world, we're here. We have issues. We are a civilized Western democracy. We shouldn't be treating people like this. We should be doing everything we can. We should be throwing resources at this to find out what's going on and to find out how we can help people. Not just me. I think, like I say, it's too late for me, but it's for the generations to come, because the problem is, with the sort of damage to genetics, it's going to continue. There's going to be more. It's not going to be smaller. It's going to get worse. Because if my son has children, say more than one child, that's another 2 possibilities, another 3 possibilities. And if they have children, That's more possibilities. The problem is scaling up, not down. And we can't ignore that.
And I've met a lot of people today, including yourself, who have been dealt some pretty bad cards, who refuse to give up. Isn't that part of the message?
Yes. We're not going away. As long as I got breath in my body, I'll be fighting for it.
Anything else, Jackie, that you think you ought to cover?
I think he's covered it, most of it, or all of it, really well.
He's done great. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I think the one thing I'd like to say is when I decided to have a child and my wife was pregnant, it kind of, there was a lot of fear and anxiety in myself. I kept a lot of that to myself because I was terrified something would happen. I was terrified Sashi would be born with a problem. And when he was born, even in the delivery room, he didn't cry instantly, and I had that gut-wrenching feeling that something's wrong. And even before that, the scans, I wasn't asking all the nice questions. I was asking things like, how long are the limbs? Does it look all right? Does it look normal? It was constant fear, constant terror that this would be passed on. And it never went away, all through the pregnancy. And it took me a long while, several months after he was born, every cry he did, everything that I thought, is he okay, is he okay? Because I had hydrocephalus when I was born, which was terrible headaches, it used to make me scream and cry. So every time my son cried or screamed, I was thinking, oh God, could it be hydrocephalus? And it kind of, I love having him, obviously I love him, he's my son, but it tainted the experience of being a new father. I just felt constantly really anxious, not just of the normal stuff, but of really underlying serious health conditions. And it was an unsettling time for me. I don't want anyone else to go through that.
Excellent. And also, just briefly describe the hydrocephalus and how they fixed it.
Hydrocephalus basically is water on the brain. I think it means that you either don't have a hole in your skull or it's blocked that drains the natural produced fluids in your skull. So what has to happen is they need to drill through your skull and put what they call a shunt valve through. So as a young child I went through many operations on my head. I've still got quite a lot of scarring. And they were painful operations. I have a lot of memories of those sort of times, not pleasant. And yeah, it was not great science at the time. So the valves they were putting in did block quite regularly. So I think I know I had more than one operation where the valves had blocked and they needed to be cleared. So yeah, I had many operations on my head and they were pretty unpleasant.
And what are you studying to be right now?
Well, this summer I graduated with a degree in forensic psychology, but I've decided while I was doing my degree to go to a completely different avenue and become an actor. So I've pursued that and it's going pretty well. It's a tough industry, but I'm getting there. I've been signed by an agent. I've done quite a few auditions for Netflix, Apple TV, came very close to a BBC drama. So things are happening. I've just got to get that final break. My dad had a sense of guilt about what happened because when I was born, he approached my mum and said, I think it's my fault. And that was kind of the only thing he ever said to mum. And from then on, it was not spoken about. Which must have been hard for him to live with. Dad, especially later in life, was constantly terrified of the Official Secrets Act that he'd signed at the time. Because often when we talk about things, he would say, you can't tell anyone about this. He says, they could still be out there, they could be listening, I can't say anything. And it was a constant worry. And especially when he got ill with Alzheimer's later on, that kind of almost paranoia, which is part of the condition, did come back, and he would often say things like, they're listening, they can hear. I can't talk about that, I can't talk about my RAF days. So that kind of paranoia and fear got worse as he got more ill, which can't have been easy for him to live with either, in that stage of his life. So yeah, it was a worry for him, and it wasn't nice to see your dad go through that. My name is Steve Pearce. My father was David Pearce, present at the nuclear tests in Maralinga, and I'm not going away.